All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. For people who are regular listeners to the show, I think you have an idea of sort of the wide range of genres that I like to talk about on the podcast. And I mean, I have my favorite genres, of course, and I often get a lot of artists in those areas. But one of the cool things about doing the show for as long as I have is it lets me reach out into some genres of music that I haven't really delved into that much. And one of those, maybe surprisingly, is pop. I mean, I listen to a lot of different stuff, but pop really has never been one of sort of my genres of choice. So it's one of the things I've sort of developed more of an interest in and more kind of knowledge of it just through the course of doing the podcast. But the guest on this episode is someone who definitely has a lot of pop in his sound, and I think that the best way to start this off is if you want to just introduce yourself and give a bit of background about what you do as an artist.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on the show here, Sam. My name's Garrett Neiles, and I am a Winnipeg-born pop rock artist. Uh, Born and raised in Winnipeg, lived there for 30 years of my life, and just recently moved out here to Toronto. But definitely excited to kind of chat about, the experience that I had in the music industry in Winnipeg, which was
Yeah.
phenomenal. And kind of share some of the cool stories of how I got into it in a relatively smaller pop market, which is Winnipeg.
Well, and I think that's part of what I was just saying too, is that one of the reasons that pop has never really been that much on my radar, other than just sort of knowing the big mainstream pop hits just through osmosis, but is because Winnipeg doesn't really have that much of a pop scene. I mean, stuff like country and folk and punk rock and metal, a lot of these genres are huge in Winnipeg, but just kind of more straight ahead pop music. It seems like there isn't really much of a scene for it. So is that part of the reason you moved to Toronto?
Yeah, definitely. And, I think that if you look back historically on some of the bigger pop rock acts that have come out of Canada, like, or Winnipeg specifically, like, I'd even consider something like Burton Cummings and the Guess Who,
Sure.
that is popular rock, that is commercial rock there. And, obviously they cut their teeth starting in Winnipeg, but they had to go to where their market was. And, not that there isn't a pop rock market in Winnipeg. There's just not as it's not as present as like a Toronto or a Montreal.
Sure.
And certainly that was kind of the reasoning behind my move out here, is to continue to build a fan base out here, start spreading throughout Canada, and take it to the next level, Nashville, LA type areas. So.
Cool, cool. So what sort of prompted the decision to move out there? Because like you said, you were born and raised in Winnipeg, spent obviously most of your life here. What sort of was the spark to say finally I'm going to Toronto? This is what's happening.
Yeah, man. So that's a great question. So just to give you kind of a background on things, I did the scene in Winnipeg for I'd say probably 10, 12 years, just playing 5, 6, 7 nights a week at
Yeah.
every bar, every private party that you could possibly do. And through it all, even playing covers, was able to build a pretty solid fan base and following, and more so importantly, relationships, friends, and people that I'd never meet if I wasn't doing what I was doing. And that all kind of culminated at I put on an EP release show at Park Theatre last November, and that was kind of the big coming out party in
Okay.
Winnipeg, and of playing my original music on the grand stage. And we actually sold it out, which was a pretty cool, thing for a first time EP release. And at that point, it, as much as Winnipeg will always be home, and I'm always gonna it's always gonna feel like coming home, playing those big shows in Winnipeg. At that point, I knew that I wanted to create something like I had in Winnipeg out in a much more saturated pop rock market like Toronto.
Is there a big learning curve to coming to somewhere like Toronto and then basically starting from scratch? Like you said, you've built up an audience in Winnipeg. People had an idea of who you were, what you did, just over that like kind of relentless playing shows, right? And now you're here and you're. Did you have to start from zero, or did you already have some ins in Toronto as far as in those relationships, like you mentioned?
Yeah, no, good question. Yeah, so there definitely is and continues to be a learning curve with, I think something as simple as just the pace out here in Toronto, and just the way that you have to be able to move at a certain pace is a learning curve. You know, the industry is a little bit different out here as well. You know, it's interesting. In Winnipeg, you can kind of get away with playing every week or you know, once a month, and out here you kind of see more acts like that are keeping the bullet in the chamber. You know, they play once a year or
Oh wow.
maybe twice a year, and then go take the show outwards at the different little districts of Ontario. So it's a really cool thing to kind of navigate. But to answer your second question, yeah, it is like starting over. And you know, the first 3-4 months since I moved out here was basically just, you know, cold reaching out to people and trying to form some networks and just trying to find my way into the music community. And I think that, you know, as much as I don't want to downplay just being a genuine good person and somebody that's fun to be around, because that is really important and that's the most important piece. But I think having an actual ability to navigate your way around a studio and be able to carry a tune, you know, being refined with your craft goes a long way out here
Sure.
too. You know, talent sees talent, or game respects game, however you wanna put it, and there's nothing more true than that than out here in Toronto for sure. There's people won't have a lot of time with you if you're kind of faking it out here. You know what I mean? Like you got to know what you're doing, and that's definitely been a big learning curve. It's definitely motivated me to double down on everything that I'm doing to make sure that I'm, you know, it's at the top of my game. So
Yeah, yeah. Do you feel like you're there yet, or do you feel like there's still some steps to climb to be at the top of your game?
I don't think like I'm the type of person I'll never feel like I'm there. But that's the fun in it. I
Sure.
really find. So, I mean, even little things like my girlfriend out here is a classically trained singer and a really great musician. And she's kind of developed these vocal exercises that I now have on my voice notes. And every day, you know, for half an hour, just whether it's in transit to work or wherever I can, you know, it's every single day doing these little vocal exercises to just to like really create that muscle memory. And then,
Yeah,
you know, as much studio time I can get, or as much time I can spend, you know, in my own studio recording, producing, just refining the skills. Those are all things that like I put into my daily schedule every single day, so that it's the consistency that's how you're gonna, you know, play the long game, right? And
sure.
I've just found that that's helped me level up so much as an artist. Is just making it every single day habits, no matter how shitty I feel, or you know, however bad I want to do anything but that. It's just like, no, just do it. Like that's how you're going to find your way in this city. So
What is has living in Toronto? Again, I know it's a relatively new thing, right? Like you said, it wasn't that long ago that you moved, but has it
Mhm.
had a noticeable impact on your songwriting or on just sort of how you approach music? Just being in a different community, being in a different situation again, where you're starting off sort of from scratch and new people, new places.
So yeah, I don't I can't really say whether it's the environment or just myself as a person that's kind of changing,
Yeah,
but I'd like to think that, you know, you're a function of your environment, right? And I think getting outside the, you know, getting outside of that circumference of area where you're so close to your parents and friends and that comfort, that safety net that's so great, but pushing outside those boundaries has really changed me as a person. It's forced me to figure things out, become a problem solver, and I
yeah,
definitely think that that's bled into my songwriting and just experimentality with the music. Whereas, you know, in previous years and even the stuff up to now, it's, you know, I'm very proud of it, but I look back and it's like, okay, you know, this is a great foundational piece, but it's in the box. I think there's places where I played it safe,
yeah.
and now now we're kind of getting to a point with the music that I'm really excited about some of these new pieces that are going to be coming out in 2024, because they're very experimental, while still in the carrying that pop rock DNA and that commerciality to it. And it's just a really exciting kind of venture for me to be in.
How do you balance that? Because I mean, usually experimental and commercial are two words that really kind of clash, right? They don't seem to go together very well. So how do you sort of have an equal measure of that pop rock DNA, like you said,
Mhm.
and then also being able to experiment and try new things that maybe are outside of your comfort zone or aren't as safe as what you were doing here in Winnipeg.
Right, right. So I always kind of like to look at it from the listener standpoint of the, for lack of a better term, uneducated musical ear, which we all were at some point. We all had
Sure.
to train ourselves. So I go back to like, when was the most enjoyable time for me listening to music from a pure listenership standpoint? And that was when I was young, didn't know anything about, production, chord structures, whatever. I wasn't analyzing anything. And so I like to kind of write my songs from that point of view of like what makes sense to 99% of the listeners out there. Let's not try and confuse them with breaking into different time signatures, or throwing in some sort of dissonant chord that's going to be, perceivably to their ear out of sort,
Yeah.
to the rest of the picture. So I like to, from a songwriting standpoint, starting out with the song, keep it simple. Does it pass the campfire test? Is it something that you can remember on first listen? That's really important to me. And I think that starts to formulate the DNA of a good pop song, something that's, repeatable, easy to remember, relatable. Then when we take that, formula, start to throw it into, into the DAW or whatever you're working in, that's where I'm talking about getting more experimental, is like,
Okay.
okay, where can we take this in terms of sound, sonic atmosphere, different instruments even playing different parts that I've never had in songs. And how can we, really take this to a new level of excitement where, things are happening, maybe not up front in the music where you can even detect it, but things are happening that are just creating this world that the listener can now enter into. And those were the worlds that I used to live in, like when I first
Sure.
started listening to music. So I think it's more experimental from a sonic atmosphere for me.
Well, I think that's an interesting way of looking at experimental too, because I mean, yeah, I think a lot of people hear experimental and they do think, dissonant chords or some kind of weird time signatures happening. But again, you're playing pop rock, you're playing music that has that sort of universal appeal, right? So you don't want to get you don't want to get too crazy with having a
No.
discordant sax solo in the middle of a song and then like someone breaking a plate and they're in front of the mic, right? But
Yeah.
I like what you said about the campfire test. Is that sort of the how you write your songs? Like, do you write very stripped down, something that's can be played, on an acoustic guitar at a campfire?
Yeah, it depends. I don't have a specific formula of how I write songs. To be quite frank, like every single song I've written has started almost with a different, a different structure of how I approach it. But for the most part, the majority of my writing is done on an acoustic guitar and singing. So yeah, when I say campfire test, the thing that I really always go back to is, can somebody repeat that back, or can somebody whistle that hook or
Sure.
hum, that part back to you, and can they remember it after the first listen? Like there's so many great songs, um of all time that, don't have anything necessarily special about the songwriting, or the, the production nature. Like, trying to think of a current song, like something like Watermelon Sugar by Harry Styles. It's a great song, don't get me wrong, but there's nothing so fantastic about the vocals or lyrics like an Adele type thing, but yet
Right.
you remember exactly what those words are to the chorus. And to me, that's a really big thing, is, are people, catching on with this, and are they remembering this from first listen? to me, it's all kind of related back to the live show. When I play live, I want everybody singing those words back, and I want that crowd participation. It's the most important thing for me, as an artist, is the live element, and you know, that just comes from 15 years of playing countless shows live. It's an infectious energy that you really can't, or I haven't been able to recreate through anything else I do. And I find that it's, you know, my greatest skill is creating that energy through live performance in that community. So
Is part of that repeatability and making those songs that you want people to sing back to you and sing along with, is part of that keeping things simple? I mean, keeping things relatively stripped down and not basic, because you can have pop songs that definitely have a level of complexity, but just I mean, focusing on the hook rather than focusing on sort of any kind of virtuosic instrumentation or anything like
yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, I'm not a virtuosic
that.
instrumentalist, so I heard
You know
this.
what I mean, though, right?
Yeah, this great quote actually from Ryan Tedder, who's one of my favorites from the industry. He's One Republic's lead singer and
Okay.
just a brilliant songwriter. He's written so many great hits, but he said something to the tune of like, "You have to suck just enough," and that really resonated with me. Like, you know, there is a brilliance in simplicity and not, you know, overcomplicating things and having those big musical tangents. um to me, it's like the best way to explain somebody to somebody is to explain it like you're explaining it to a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
So how can I explain my song to a listener like a 7-year-old's listening? You know, and if it sounds kind of counterintuitive to, you know, the whole maturity and you know, depth behind songwriting, but can you create something that has depth but yet, you know, a 7-year-old can understand it? Is the, you know, the juxtaposition there.
Yeah, no, I definitely I know what you mean by that. I mean, I think a great example of that is the Ramones. I mean, my kids love the Ramones. I love the
Mhm.
Ramones, and when they were like 5 years old, I would play them, you know, the first album, and they
Yeah.
would sing along to every song immediately, like in the
Yeah.
car. You know, give it like 5 minutes, and they're singing along to everything on the record. And it's because, yeah, it's simple, it sticks in your head, and some of the songs are deeper when you think about it, but it's that kind of chorus and repeating in three chords and the truth kind of thing that really, it works for adults and kids alike. Yeah,
Well, Blitzkrieg Bop's like one of the finest examples. You know, that is, you won't get much better of a hook than "I oh, let's go." And
exactly. Yeah,
I'm sure any 7-year-old, you know, after hearing that the first time is gonna be yelling out that when it comes along next. But, you know, meanwhile, the song's about war and you know, like invasion. It's an incredibly deep song, but it is definitely, it comes with a lot of experience in songwriting to be able to do that, and that's what gets me back to that consistency thing, is like you really can't teach those types of things.
yeah.
Doesn't matter how much talent you're born with. Like, you can get a head start obviously with talent, but you only develop that kind of knowledge and those kind of instincts by just doing it and doing it every day, right? So it's, yeah.
Well, then it becomes that muscle memory for songwriting as well as playing, right? Because you know how to, you know instinctively what's going to work and how to make a hook and what's going to stick in people's heads. Because, yeah, like you said, practice makes perfect.
Yeah, well, and even now, like I, so I used to be a very quick writer, and I thought that I had this natural gift, like it would just flow out onto paper, and as I started to progress down the songwriting path, I started to develop a little bit more of a filter for what was good and what was shit, and it started to slow down my writing a little bit, and I had to kind of look at things and be like, okay, this is, you know, it's a nice piece of writing, but it has no structure and it has no hook. So now things are kind of coming full circle, where now I have that filter and I'm getting quicker with things, and I do think that that is a good place to be in, to be able to have that filter, but to be able to quickly move to the next place that you need to get to. I don't like sitting and swelling on things for too long. You know, I like to move on to a, you know, perhaps different part of the song or a different part of the story if we're stuck on one part.
Yeah.
Uh, and the other big thing that I'd say to younger upcoming artists is finish everything. Like unless you know it's a total red flag disaster, but rarely are those the cases. I think my best songs have been recycled parts from other songs. So finish everything, document it, voice note it on your phone.
Yeah.
Uh, Write the lyrics in a Google document, save all your songs, because I guarantee you, you're going to go into a songwriting session one day with nothing. And you're going to open up a Google document and you're going to go, what are we writing about today? And then you're going to go, oh, yeah, I have that song that I, you know, recorded from 3 months ago that I love the bridge to. Why don't we try that as a course type of
Yeah.
thing? And that is literally how I write is trying to make use of everything that I've done and documenting everything I've done.
If someone wants to hear your music, I mean, say someone's listening to this and this is their first introduction to you. They might be from Winnipeg, they might have seen you play before, or it could be someone who's just, you know, hearing about you for the first time. What's the
Mhm.
best way to find your music? What would you encourage people to check out as far as your music?
Yeah, so whatever their favorite streaming platform is, so the songs are on all the DSPs. So if you're a Spotify person or if you're an Apple Music person, you can just find it under Garrett Neiles. The one thing I am big on is music videos. So if you do want to check out the visuals, if you're that, you know, that MTV Much Music era person like I am, I still love the music video and I try and create as much visual content for everyone that I can. So you can check me out on YouTube as well. That's a really cool platform to check out the live performances as well as music videos for the songs.
Well, and I know you're in Toronto now, and most of the people listening to this are I'm assuming anyway in Manitoba because it's a Manitoba focused show. But
Yeah.
where can someone go to find out more information about, you know, potential shows you have coming up, or even more importantly, new music that's coming out? Like you said, you have things for 2024 that you're working on. What's the best way to follow you online and find out what's new in your world?
So I actually have a big EP release show coming up on November 16th at the Park Theatre. So it's a
Okay, so
Thursday.
you're back in town, yeah.
I'm back in town in Winnipeg at the legendary Park Theatre. So excited to be back there. We've got an all-star band coming on, a couple of Winnipeg absolute all-stars. Cam Cordova's on drums, Jay Spodner on guitar, and Tyler Wagger on bass. Guys are absolute monsters. We got the Kingsway opening up, and we're actually closing out the night with a cover band that I play in called the Specialists, who it's so much fun. And so yeah, if you want to come check out the show, it's November 16th at the Park Theatre, and you can find all the information for the show through my Instagram or the Park Theatre's website. There's an Eventbrite link. And the best way to find out is just follow along on Instagram. I post everywhere that we're playing, and shoot me a message, DM me. I love responding and having conversation with new friends, new fans, and talking about the music or talking about upcoming shows. And yeah.
Awesome.